Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Education Minister to meet with Overseas Examination Council over CXC suspension policy next month. Crime Management Oversight Committee looking to the private sector for funding. And later in sports, injury rules out Reggae Boys captain for upcoming World Cup qualifiers. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shane Masters and here are the details. The Ministry of Education is expected to meet with the Overseas Examination Council to discuss the discontinuance or suspension policy of CXC subjects. Speaking at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing, Education Minister Favour Williams says the meeting will take place on Tuesday, June 4 at 10 a.m.
CXC was established by member countries of the Caribbean to serve member countries. And so decisions like the continuance of subjects ought to rightfully to be discussed with education ministers from these member countries prior to public announcements. Having registered the concerns of our principals and other concerned Jamaicans, in no uncertain terms, we will be meeting with CXC along with other regional education ministers.
Mrs. Williams says the group will also be taking the matter further.
I would like to note as well that across the Caribbean, other colleague education ministers are very concerned about this discontinuance decision. And as a body, we have decided to take the matter to the Council for Human and Social Development, a committee of the CARICOM, which seeks to promote and develop coordinated policies and programs.
In the meantime, it was also announced that all teachers who marked school-based assessments, SBAs, in 2022 and 2023 have been paid. The teachers had previously expressed frustration over the delay. Executive Director of the Overseas Examination Commission, Hector Stevenson, says all payments were made on Tuesday. Mr. Stevenson was speaking at this morning's post-cabinet press briefing.
With respect to 2022, those are retroactive payments, so all schools have been paid. All schools that have made submissions have been paid, retroactive payments, and all schools that submitted information for 2023 have been paid. There are schools that have made submissions that we've had to return for corrections and so on. And as soon as they return to us, we will complete those payments. So good news, everybody has been paid who has made submission to the OEC.
Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Senator Matthew Samuda, is insisting that significant investments have been made to improve the water supply in St. Elizabeth. Addressing a concern about a lack of water in the parish at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing, Mr. Samuda says the investments are not limited to that alone.
I do not mind to speak about it. It's a major investment in water security in southern St. Elizabeth, one that was announced by former Prime Minister Michael Manley in 1973, that this government will make a reality now. It's important to what I'm responsible for because it will rest several wells that have been used for agricultural purposes and return them to the NWC, and will have a transformational impact on water security in St. Elizabeth, north and south.
To other news now, there's a call this afternoon for more details on the status of active gangs in the country. This as gang feuds continue to drive the country's murder rate. More in this report.
In his sectoral presentation in Parliament recently, National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang revealed there had been a 56% reduction in gangs across the island. At the start of the year, he said there were 244 gangs operating in the country, and to date that has been reduced to 106. But Professor of Caribbean Sustainable Development at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Anthony Clayton, says there are first to third generation gangs that are still active. First generation gangs being those who operate at the street corners.
They may be involved in minor levels of violence, but they don't present the threat of second generational and third generational transnational organized crime. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the total number. We need to know which type of gang is being reduced. We We need to see a really sustained reduction in the level of Generation 2 and Generation 3 gangs in particular. They're the ones that do the most social and economic damage.
And while acknowledging the reduction in homicides of 11% up to May 27, Chairman of the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, C. Mark Lloyd Distant, says though good, a sustained reduction is needed.
I believe, certainly the data would have shown, and Commissioner would have said it as well, I believe a significant reason for the reduction is presence. And, moving from 11,000 feet on the street, or 11,000 officers to 14,000, from 14,700 officers, we believe has made a significant difference. And for that, we commend the JCF and we commend the government on that achievement.
In the meantime, CMOC has turned to the private sector for funding support to bolster its communication strategy. It was recently revealed that the oversight body is strapped for cash as the government has not fulfilled its commitment to provide funding. Mr. Distant says in the interim, the private sector will be asked to fill the funding gap.
The impact here largely is around our communication programs. It's one thing to send out press releases and to have this kind of communication, but to really get all of Jamaica aware of where things are progressing. Let's get out the veranda conversations around what somebody told me. Let us assist you by giving you facts and data. That's what CMOC is here for. And the funding support really is to allow us to distill between the anecdotal statements and provide some factual context to how we're progressing in our fight against crime.
He remains hopeful the government will release the funds. Mr. Distant further explained there's discouragement to certain items which were in the original consensus document. He says another document is being drafted presently, after which it is hoped that there will be consensus on all points. Kerry-Ann Simpson, TVJ News.
The Westmoreland police seized 2 illegal firearms on Tuesday. The police say this was done during a targeted operation in the Geneva district. The operation took place between 4:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. at the premises where the guns were found, along with a bag containing 15 9mm rounds. The police say they will continue efforts to address violent crime and the proliferation of illegal firearms in the parish. And still in Westmoreland, a man was arrested after he was found in possession of stolen goats. Another man is on the run. According to reports, the Whitton police carried out an operation that's a pre-dawn operation in the Petersfield area yesterday morning when a black Toyota Wish motorcar was signaled to stop. The driver did not comply, which led to a police chase. The vehicle was eventually intercepted and the driver detained, but the passenger escaped. 6 adult goats, a kid, and a bull were recovered. The police suspect the animals were being transported to a slaughterhouse in the area. They also believe they were stolen from St. Elizabeth. Now it's understood that the man in custody was wanted by the St. Elizabeth police for animal theft. And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us, more stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. The sitting of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee is currently underway, and the absence of Chairman Seymour Panton has created a stir. Though members of his team were present on his behalf with a note, Legal and Constitutional Affairs Minister Marlene Malahoo Fort was among several committee members who lamented that Mr. Panton's no-show was off-putting.
I did not hear any apology, and I wonder whether there is some misunderstanding on my part as a member of this very important committee. I wait to hear whether there is a misunderstanding on my part, but just to say that for some time now, as a committee, we have spoken about having an interaction with the commissioners themselves, as important as it is to interact with the directors and other staff. And we certainly would not want the impression to be given that as servants of the people, we are not availing ourselves to discuss the matters of the people at all levels.
And it's now time for the Business Minute.
The agriculture, forestry and fisheries industry grew by an estimated 7.7% in the first quarter. Senior Director in charge of Economic Planning and Research at the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, James Stewart, says the sector's performance reflected the impact of favorable weather conditions.
Higher levels of production relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023, when the industry was negatively impacted by drought conditions. The performance during the quarter was due to greater productivity, as reflected in a 4.7% expansion in output per hectare. Additionally, there was a 5.9% increase in the hectares of domestic crops reaped. Relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023, output for all parishes increased, with the exception of Westmoreland and St. Catherine.
Dairy Manufacturers Inc. is recalling infant formula sold under the names Creselac and Pharmalac. The Food and Drug Administration says it never evaluated the batch to determine whether it meets food safety and nutritional standards. The products, sold only in Texas, were packaged in a cardboard and aluminum 12.4-ounce can. The company says no illnesses or adverse reactions have been reported. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Hal Shane Burke.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In this evening's Health Report, we look at gout.
Everything comes back to our diet. A balanced diet with adequate water intake. The problem is we eat too much proteins, and it is the protein that is broken down into uric acid. In fact, your body don't really store protein, Once you eat it, so if you eat a big hunk of beef, your body going to metabolize it. It's going to pull out the fat, it's going to store it, it's going to break down the protein itself, and the end product is going to be uric acid. That can trigger the process.
That's the Health Report in Primetime News at 7. And now for today's healthy living tip. Limit alcohol intake. Avoid sugary drinks. Manage stress. Stay hydrated and rest.
Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, UN Development Specialist Gary Coney has been named Haiti's new Prime Minister nearly a month after a coalition within a fractured transitional council sought to choose someone else for the position. The long-awaited move comes as gangs continue to terrorize the capital of Port-au-Prince, opening fire in once peaceful neighborhoods and using heavy machinery to demolish several police stations and prisons. Mr. Coney has been UNICEF's Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean since January 2023 and previously served as Haiti's Prime Minister from October 2011 to May 2012 under then-President Michel Martelly. On the international scene, Election Day in South Africa is underway in one of the most pivotal votes since the end of apartheid. The African National Congress has been in power since Nelson Mandela led it to victory in 1994. However, polls have shown the party may not get the 50% of the vote it needs to keep control. That could mean the ANC has to form a coalition government for the first time. A coalition of smaller opposition parties hopes to wrestle control from the ANC outright. And authorities fear a second landslide and a disease outbreak are looming at the scene of a Papua New Guinea's mass casualty disaster. Thousands were told to prepare to evacuate because of water streams and bodies trapped beneath the tons of debris that has flattened much of the village. The blanket of debris has become more unstable with recent rain and streams trapped between the ground and rubble. Papua New Guinea's government says it thinks more than 2,000 people were buried beneath the rubble. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Nakinsky Robinson.
And we head to a quick break. When we come back, Jordan Fort will have your midday sports report.